joining me is Daphne Kane, member for Garth, and we're talking about public service broadcasting, something that is of interest to a lot of people. You've got a motion coming down for Tynwald this month. Is it particularly about Manx Radio? Is it about public service broadcasting in general? What are you aiming to find out?
Well, the motion states that I'm seeking to have a select committee of 3 members appointed to look into the current licence conditions, the delivery model and the funding of public service broadcasting.
That's Manx Radio, right, isn't it?
Well, Manx Radio is the deliverer of public service broadcasting at the present, but actually they're also a commercial station. And is that appropriate? Does that skew the market? Does it make it anti-competitive against the other media operators on the Isle of Man? And in terms of the licence conditions being looked at, and I know there have been a report, I think Mr Thomas made the point in the previous Tynwald when I asked questions about various aspects of the funding. He made the point there was a new select committee, a new report on Manx Radio every 4 years. And I don't think that they've got it right. Not to say that it was wrong, I just don't think it went far enough. I think at the moment, the issues I have with public service broadcasting is that it's a kind of hodgepodge, it's a bit of this, a bit of that. But also, in terms of the Isle of Man, they have to go to Treasury still every year and say, can we have this much funding? So currently, £875,000 subvention.
And they overspent as well this time.
And they're overspent, and where are the sanctions for that? And also, but when they're asking for the money from Treasury, Treasury, of course, is looking to reduce and reduce. And I suppose what I'm doing here, now the Treasury Minister said it would be coming back for debate, but obviously they have far bigger matters to concern them, hence the fundamental review of the health service. Well, you could say that this is a fundamental review of public service broadcasting so that we can assess, do we have it right for the Isle of Man? Because while they're going to the Treasury to say, can we have our annual subvention and money to do the property and make it disability compliant and everything else, they have to get the licence conditions from the Communications Commission, which is the Minister for Home Affairs involvement. So you have a public service broadcaster getting direction from 2 lots of political departments of government. Is that a bit close? It needs to be seen to be separate from government and also commercial activity.
Okay, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about the station. They wanted this money to increase the building size, didn't they, to put in a lift, but also they were going to add on quite a bit of size. That did get turned down in the end, didn't it? Or was it in hold? I can't remember whether
we don't know where that is, but that isn't the fundamental part of this review that I'm thinking is necessary.
It's actually what comes out of the speakers at the broadcast side, is it?
Yeah, because also in terms of the licence conditions, they are propping up the AM transmitters. So while the rest of the world is moving to digital, the Isle of Man that went first and probably best in terms of 50 years of public service local radio, we are still having AM transmission. Where's the future vision for where we go? And if they're having AM transmission, but actually Tynwald, political keys questions are broadcast on AM along with the TT. But if it was the national broadcaster, why doesn't that go on FM? Why don't they develop the other frequency? Why do we pay, I think it was £40,000 this year to prop up the AM transmitter?
Bizarrely, the BBC are switching off all their AM at the moment, and three stations on the same frequency as Manx Radio are going off the air soon. So the AM will go probably further afield, but that's just a bit of interest. But they'll shut them down.
Wouldn't you listen on the internet? So and if you had digital, you could have multi-channels. So, or, you know, in another 5 years, will the new house come in and will Manx Radio still be on AM? And if that is just to provide a political coverage or the TT coverage, who's listening to it? Because the other argument is, looking at the figures, that whatever the licence conditions, and they state you must provide 40% speech radio. Well, is that the model that the Isle of Man wants? And perhaps the Isle of Man is happy. According to a 2010 Select Committee report I read, every BBC licence fee payer is paying £29 for Manx Radio on top of the licence fee. But from where I'm standing, why don't we go to another department, the Cabinet Office, which deals with the BBC licence, and go knocking on that door and say, well, actually, we're funding this. We don't have the same for our licence fee as other areas. Could there be some negotiation over funding for our public service broadcasting?
I mean, everything's moved so fast, hasn't it? The actual range of broadcasting, how we can now all broadcast like ourselves on the internet, has moved the goalposts. Do you think the model is broken then? Do you think that's what part of the review is, how to do it all in the future? Should it be done like it is now, or do you stop it and start again with something brand new?
Well, that's why the motion refers to the technological advances as well as the demographic changes. Because what is Manx Radio for? What does the Isle of Man want of its nation station? Do we want it to be as it is? Do we want the amount of speech radio? Do we want to take the advertising out of it and let the commercial world fight over the bit of cake that's
certainly
left?
the competition, they would like to see that happen, obviously. They would love it to have no advertising, I'm sure.
But why should it have advertising when it has this massive reach that it is the public service broadcaster? So it has a lot more resources into the news, which is as you'd expect, and it has a flagship programme on the morning mandate, which gets very high listenership across the island. And politically, that's the one that you have awareness of. But other stations, more and more going around the island, Manx Radio isn't the radio of choice. 25 years ago, it would be Susie Richardson and Swap Shop, and there weren't these other stations, and there wasn't the choice. The fact that they've achieved that in the current market is great, but is it appropriate? And in terms of the technological advances, and obviously the easier reach of video and the various sports package and other things that are coming out, in terms of what we are paying for Manx Radio, is that right for the Isle of Man as it stands at the minute? Okay. Or could it be better funded from elsewhere? But also, what's the vision for the future?
But every administration has a look into this, and they had the Myers report, and from that they increase programming in speech and that sort of thing. But there's still a big worry, isn't there, about the way the management to staff chiefs and Indians. Do you feel that would come under your remit? Finding out why there's this high pay for some of the managers, the directors?
In terms of, it's not specifically looking at the structure or the detail of the programme, it's looking the technological advances, what's right model for the Isle of Man, where do we want to see it go in the future? Is Manx Radio going to be the nation's broadcaster? Do we see a future that there's TV broadcasting public service funded? And when you get into that state, you don't want to knock out, as from my point of view, the plurality of stations, and it is essential in a democracy that we have public service broadcasting.
And back to the BBC thing, the BBC don't do anywhere near the same broadcasting here as they do on the Channel Islands. This comes up over and over again. They're running two BBC, Jersey and Guernsey, plus television. Do you feel that we've missed out? Is this down to Communications Commission not banging hard enough, or we're not wanting it?
That's what I'm saying. There are three different political groups that are involved in looking after public service broadcasting. So is that where this disconnect from what you put on the licence conditions with what that costs, that these are imposed on the radio station. The radio station has to go to get the subvention confirmed from Treasury. Treasury is looking to save money. Treasury is having to look at the health service and education funding. It's not a huge amount in terms of government funding, the £1 million per year, and then there's some money income for Gaelic broadcasting, for instance, that the BBC contributes. But overall, I think it's the model, and the reason for yet another select committee, if Tynwald approves it, is that the model and the delivery of our public service broadcasting, with all the technological changes, with the current market of Manx Radio, with what there is in the media, it needs a fundamental review, because otherwise, if you're going to say for unending years, Manx Radio is going to be based at Douglas Head, and we're going to be paying out $1 million plus to keep them there.
And that building is in not good condition, they keep saying. What's the whole thing you think the future's going to be, though? Do you see a future with Manx Radio, as Manx Radio, or start again?
No, I don't want to start again. I think I should say, I've got very close links with Manx Radio. My husband does the specialist music programme. I have brother-in-law who's on the news. I've known very good friends for a very long time who are both on the management and in broadcasting, plus in the wider media on the island. So I think, and I grew up, obviously, I came to start as a reporter here, and I grew up with the media and with communications. So I do know quite a bit about Manx Radio, about the media generally, the media market on the Isle of Man, but I'm not the world's expert, and the point of having a select committee is that everybody can give their view, and that's as much the Manx Radio listener, the 3FM listener, the BBC. It's to say, what should we have as the model to deliver public service broadcasting on the Isle of Man?
And remind me, they were ring-fenced. I remember Eddie Tears stood up when answering question. There's a few gasps in there because nobody else got money set aside, are they still ring-fenced? Or
no, I believe if it had been ring-fenced, it would be well over £1 million by now.
Right.
And it has been sort of pared down. So I think it's £875,000 for the third year, and it's only an increase of £25,000 from previous. So they're having to fund more and more, cross-fund from the commercial activity to deliver public service broadcasting, is what I'm hearing. And I don't think that's sustainable. And in terms of what they produce and also the payments or the salaries across the staff, who are very dedicated, and actually we have a fantastic public service radio station on the Isle of Man. But then I hear one Sunday morning before Christmas they were going live for part of a political programme to BBC Radio Orkney, to a studio to pipe in a voice and a commentator from there, and I think BBC Radio Orkney, they have a radio station.
Oh, they've got a massive setup in Orkney. They've got all the Alba stuff and going on. Yeah.
So where's the BBC contribution to here? I'm not necessarily sure that the Isle of Man would want, or BBC would want, BBC Radio Isle of Man. I think that time is gone, and in terms of BBC funding. But it does seem, if over £5 million is collected in BBC licence fee, maybe one avenue would be to say, knock on the door, what could you do?
Okay, you can't go on the committee, presumably, because you said you've got too close ties.
I've got very close ties. I would love to be on the committee, but it's kind of a matter for Tynwald. I've worked in media, I have connections, but I'm not anyway in business with those places now. So that would be a matter for Tynwald to see if that was an actual interest, and I'll be doing a bit more research on that. So we'll see. My point would be, I would like to see the committee have the freedom to look at the current market in terms of media, the needs of the Isle of Man and the wishes of the nation for what it wants in terms of public service broadcasting.